I'm Bill Auten of Auten Claims Management.
I'm Chantel Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster. Hey, Chantel. Today, we're going to talk about cyber insurance.
Yes. And the cyborgs
The cyborgs.
and how the robots are going to come to kill all of us.
And we have a special guest.
Cybermen. Yes.
And we have a special guest today, Sean Griffin.
Yes. Sean is my cyber attorney. I always go to him when I have cyber questions, and I recommend everybody else do too. Follow him on LinkedIn. He'll give us his information in just a bit, but he is an experienced litigator from Robinson and Cole. He has accumulated a keen knowledge in addressing all of our complex legal issues, whether as a business litigator, leader, and data privacy. Sean is the one who spots these issues and anticipates the contingencies, such as me saying on air, recorded, that all of my passwords are exclamation point Sean beginning with the number 5 is the best attorney ever. He's going to give me a warning about that, later, as my data attorney. Yes. And his clients include, insurance companies, defense contractors, manufacturers, law firms. They all turn to him because he is the end all and be all of cyber.
We talk to claims adjusters and claims professionals, and most insurance companies will have an IT department that handles in-house all of their cybersecurity stuff. Occasionally, they might have a phishing exercise that they'll go through or something like that. But beyond that, the people that are actually handling claims, what should they be looking out for in terms of cybersecurity from your standpoint?
Oh, that's a big question, the $10,000 question, isn't it?
Mhm.
And it depends on what kind of thing you're looking for, because the thing about cybercrime, a lot of it doesn't look like what you think of as cybercrime. I mean, if somebody comes to an adjuster and says, okay, I just got a ransomware attack, okay, that's pretty obvious. For example, an adjuster comes through and they say, okay, somebody stole my iPhone. All right. Some iPhone from the same area. All right. Another iPhone stolen. All right. And honestly, if you're an adjuster, how would you catch that one? That's an SIU function, right? But then are you necessarily going to put that together with a cybercrime? Like me, I do. I say, if you're having an unusual number of phones stolen from a particular area, especially the same type of phone, iPhone, Samsung, what have you, chances are somebody is taking a phone, wiping it, reusing the same phone to submit false claims to the insurance company. That's one of the things they like to do. But unless you're thinking cybersecurity, not necessarily going to put all of that together, unless, somebody else on a higher level sort of picks up on that. And so, what should they be looking for in terms of cybercrime? Well, nowadays, just like we do everything on the computer, all crime is now cybercrime, in my opinion. And it all sort of mushes together. And from an adjuster's perspective, you can only do as much as you can do. But hopefully your SIU folks, your fraud investigation folks, can step in and sort of put the big pieces together in a way that an individual adjuster, it's not really fair to expect them to recognize what would be run-of-the-mill fraud that has a cyber component to it, like the way somebody else might.
Wow.
So-
Yeah, that is, I'm sorry, Bill.
That's okay.
I was going to say that is amazing because I agree, I would not have ever thought about the iPhone or your phone being stolen being kind of like a cyber thing. But I am a member of the Big I Ask the Expert. We had just recently received a question about, quote, who's responsible when a customer receives like a spoofed email or spoofed invoice and they've paid it. And now the vendor or the vendor's paid it and the customer's like, well, I didn't get it. I want my money. We know we're supposed to have strong passwords. Like I said, mine is exclamation point. Sean is the best attorney ever. But is this occurring more often? Like, how are we supposed to be recognizing these sorts of things and who is responsible?
Another great question.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to say that Sean is the best attorney is a fantastic password that I think everybody should use. Matter of fact, everyone just have that as their mantra in their office, right? So that's perfect. But second, in terms of phishing emails, which you described, or spoofed emails, we call it BEC, business email compromise, whatever you call it. It's a huge problem, and it happens to be more sophisticated than you would think. And I'm going to tell you, I was about to say tell you one example, but actually it's a whole bunch of examples. So the reason you won't be able to tell who it is because it happens so frequently. Some high-level company employee gets an email, just like you described, hey, pay this invoice, or they get an email from the president of the company. We need to send $500,000 to this address in Hong Kong that we've never sent any money to. Here's the wire instructions. And they do it because it came from the president, Joe Blow, or Jane Blaine goes ahead and does it. Or they get a spoofed invoice. Had so many clients say, okay, I got a spoofed invoice, and they just pay the invoice because, especially if you're expecting to get an invoice from Best Buy or whoever, okay, I got it, I just got to pay. You're not really going to think too much about what email it came from or whatever. Now, I would say hopefully anybody listening to this is, training their companies or training their insureds to, if there's this change in wire instructions, verify that. And verifying gets harder and harder. We could talk about that a while, but I'll do something to verify it. Don't just say, oh, how about that? A brand new wire instructions. And the owner of it is Chantel Roberts. That's suspicious.
Not suspicious at all. Not
Also,
suspicious at all. And
Also-
my wire transfer number is 0000555.
Exactly. Why is she wearing so many Louboutin shoes all of a
Yeah.
sudden? I don't know. It's a mystery. So it's a huge it was huge like 5 years ago. And now it's just like massive. And because it's so easy. And again, that's the sort of thing that's just fraud, not just cyber fraud. And there's an insurance coverage question that I'll get to in a little bit. But you asked who's responsible for that. Well, the person, ultimately responsible is the person who paid the invoice, right? If you send it to a vendor and the vendor said, okay, I didn't get the money, I can prove I didn't get the money. Look, and you say, okay, you have proven you didn't get the money. Okay, you were victim of a fraud. The vendor has nothing to do with that. There's no reason, unless the vendor signed an exceptionally poor contract, there's no basis in the law for the vendor to take that loss just because you weren't paying attention to your invoices, basically. And so they go after the person who paid the invoice, the customer paid the invoice, the fake invoice.
That's really interesting because I said, well, I mean, ultimately it would be, of course, the person who did the spoofing, good luck finding them, but the person who's paid the invoice should not have to necessarily pay twice. So it's interesting that you're saying that. And I do want, and you're going to say this, but I do want to caution, just in case we don't say this, don't push back via email if you think something is suspicious, like pick up the phone and call, because a lot of times if you're doing those spoof emails or you're getting those spoof emails, if you hit reply, it's going right back to the burglars.
Right. It's going back to, Carl, the cyber criminal. He'll say, yes, it's me. Bob, send me that money. Mama needs new Louboutins. What?
Exactly.
And there you off and running. So so is it fair to the customer should have to pay twice? Like Clint Eastwood said in Unforgiven, deserves got nothing to do with it. So, the vendor did not make a mistake. The customer made the mistake. The customer still owes the vendor just as much money as they would otherwise. They just got defrauded. And that's really on them. Now, what oftentimes a customer does, they say, wait a minute, I have cyber insurance for this. They turn around and they go to their side, their insurance company and say, hey, I have a cyber coverage for this, for cyber crimes. You should pay this because I got defrauded via email. And most courts around the country that I've seen will say this is not cyber crime. This is just plain old fraud. The fact that it was executed via email doesn't make it a cyber crime under the terms of the policy. In the terms of the policy, that's because the terms of the policy will specifically describe what they count as a cyber crime, and it'll be, okay, ransomware, that's one thing. If somebody hacks into your computer system and extracts somebody, that's one thing. If somebody, there are a lot of things that manage that, but just because you got an email and paid an invoice because you got an email, that doesn't turn a regular fraud into a cyber fraud per se. That's the way the insurance companies and insurance coverage law tends to go. Now, depending where you are, your mileage may vary, but the courts say, well, what if you just got a letter saying, hey, send the money you owe me to Robert's Consulting, care of Christian Louboutin, and that would have been the same thing, right?
Right.
And that always has seemed very persuasive to me. But that's how insurance coverage law looks at it. Now, that's one of those deals where the same company that was defrauded would come to me or somebody like me and say, hey, I just was a victim of cybercrime. And then I'll say, well, okay, I can help you out to an extent. I can, we can see what we can do about getting your money back. Sometimes the federal government could track down the payment and stop it before it goes all the way to Hong Kong. If you act fast, the bank can do that too. If you act fast, you can get lucky sometimes. There are things you could do. All hope is not lost. But in terms of your narrow question, yeah, the customer does need to be on the ball. And I want to I'm probably jumping ahead here, but you said you have to pick up the phone and verify, and I need to amplify that. Yes, pick up the phone and call the customer. Don't call the number of the email for the reasons you already said. Amplify that. And now, just to terrify you, so I was talking a little bit about AI and deep fakes, whereby picking up the phone is what you really do need to do, because sometimes they'll say, okay, I'll give you a call. And oh man, it sounds just like Sean Griffin. My sister told me a story. She was like, oh, my cousin called me up and he was talking to me about something or other, but it was really weird because we just talked. And I was like, I just talked on the phone with him. I'm like, don't you realize we just talked on the phone? He's like, no, but I need some money. And it sounded just like him, but I knew something so suspicious. So I hung up and I called my actual cousin and I said, oh, you called me? He's like, no, I didn't call me. Now, that is extraordinarily terrifying because neither my sister nor my cousin is a famous individual. They are, they are not somebody whose name that has a bunch of vocal samples out there on the internet, not like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt. They just somehow got a sample of my cousin's voice somehow or other. They use AI to make a very realistic sample of that, and they used it to call my sister like last month. And I said, Denise, that's terrifying. I didn't know it got that advanced. I mean, how did you ever catch that? He's like, you remember like 5 years ago when mom called you? And I say, mom called me. She was terrified because my son was in Europe. He was in a car accident. He needed some money. He was scared to call me. So he was about to wire him the money. I'm like, and mom called me. And she's like, mom, that doesn't happen. You should know that that's not actually happening, because the least believable part of that story is my son hesitating to ask me for money. That never happens in life. He's asleep in his bedroom. No, it's him. And eventually we sorted it all out, but it was a fraud. That was 5 years ago. And Denise told me last month, no, that guy 5 years ago sounded just like your son. I recognized his voice. It sounded like him. My son at the time was like 18, 19, I'll say, So again, he wasn't famous either. His voice was really all out there. AI can do that. AI can duplicate a voice very convincingly. And nowadays with deepfakes, they can also imitate a video pretty well if you're not paying attention. And so even if you're on a Zoom call with somebody and you think they're talking, it's becoming more and more likely that it's not actually that person, it's AI. Now, if you're really paying attention, you have reason to be suspicious. You can tell, just like you could sort of tell CGI when you see the movie nowadays, but you have to be paying attention for it. So if you're talking about sending large sums of money, it's worth being extraordinarily cautious. So the next time you get ready to send Sean Griffin, $500,000, which get my invoice at the end of this call. That's legit. Just go ahead and send it. Go ahead and pay it. But jump through every hoop you can think of to make sure that all of that is legitimate before you send something to a new wire transfer information.
Sean, just to clarify, it sounds as if what you were saying earlier about the receipt of a bill via email, and then maybe the payment of that bill via an electronic transfer or some other internet-based payment form is no different than receiving something by regular mail and mistakenly paying it with a check. That doesn't, just because you received it via email and paid it via some electronic thing, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be considered a cybersecurity kind of a breach. Is that correct?
Under the terms of most policies, and again, your mileage will vary. This is not legal advice, I'm obligated to say, but there are cases all around the country. I remember one in Minnesota, one in Missouri, all over the place saying, listen, let's say you got cyber coverage policy. We understand that this happened electronically, but really this is no different than if somebody handed you a letter and they pay Chantel Roberts $100,000, and then you went to the bank, wrote a check and put it in the mailbox and mailed her, $100,000. It's all the same thing. And the fact that it happened electronically does not put it within cyber coverage within the meaning of your insurance policy. Now, you might have an insurance policy that covers that. I mean, it is, you can buy insurance, I'm sure, that covers business email compromise, but that's probably not going to be your cyber coverage part. It's going to be in your CGL part or your business owner part, something like that. Is okay if you get defrauded, we'll pay. If it's not an inside job or whatever the policy's terms say, but that in and of itself generally doesn't magically turn it into a cyber policy, even though you did it all electronically.
I'm still in the fact that I'm actually not here. I'm in France shopping because this is AI right now. But I was sitting there wondering while you were talking, like, how could AI or thieves or whatever get your cousin's voice and know to call your sister and all this kind of stuff. And then it occurred to me, Chantel, they're going to get your voice by all of these podcasts that you're doing and all of this TikTok and Instagram when you talk rather than putting your photo up with some background music or whatever. So it's really, really interesting,
Yeah,
scary, like you said.
it's scary because it's not like, my cousin's in his 70s. He's not on TikTok. He's not doing podcasting. They just happen to get his voice rather. I suspect that, he's talked to enough shady telemarketers that are recording his calls, and somehow or other that voice got over here and over here and over here. And somebody said, you know what? Here's what we'll do. It's not like my sister's a millionaire or anything either, right? So neither was my mom. So, it's not like they're going after, Elon Musk's family or anything like that. They're just going after somebody who, might sort of not be paying attention or might fall into it. My mother was older when she got the phone call. I mean, old people get duped over the telephone all the time, just sending money to people they shouldn't send money to. This is just another form of that. All that's to say is that, one, I wouldn't worry too much about the TikToks or everything, because if they could get my cousin's voice, and he's in his 70s, then they could probably get anybody's voice they want to. And then it's a matter of them figuring out, okay, that was Joe Blow. He lives here. Let's see if we could figure out who he's related to. That probably wasn't the hardest thing in the world. He might have, especially given how much of our information we have to give out to companies or whatever, he might not have ever been hacked in his life, but somewhere he shops was hacked. And then somewhere, somehow they figured out what phone numbers he calls. And then, okay, that's the person we could call based on that. That's what we can do. That's how they operate. I mean, they don't necessarily go after the biggest fish in the world. Some people are just happy to get a couple $1,000s at a time from small fries like us.
I had another question for you earlier when you started to speak about the stolen iPhone. It gave me the impression that where we analyze things that come in from a claims standpoint one way, you have this cybersecurity thread woven through your thinking and your thought process that you're applying this kind of model that one thing that you see may potentially be related to cybersecurity violations or theft in some way. Is that the truth? And should claims adjusters have that same kind of template in their mind when they're looking at claims?
It's true for me because I do so much cybersecurity, privacy, AI work that, when I see something like that, it'll sort of trigger something in my brain. I'll recognize it because I've seen it a lot. If you are an adjuster, you haven't seen it a lot. I mean, that's why people have to hire me, because, I do this sort of thing. Having said that, a lot of this is going to have to be training, for example, right? If you take a training that says, hey, wait a minute, if you've seen a lot of, a spike in smartphone thefts in a particular area, maybe that's something we really need to look into. It's going to be not the easiest thing in the world to catch, but something to look into. A spike in insurance health claims, for example. They all of a sudden, like this, people named Sean Griffin seem to be getting sick a lot, but they have different social security numbers. Or what they do is they take my social security number and, okay, this Sean Griffin and it's Bill, and a bunch of people with the same social security number, and since the social security number is valid, the computer system will let it go, and that they apply for insurance using the fake name but a real social security number, and then they immediately get sick for something very expensive to cure, and then you're paying those claims too. It's impossible, just for somebody, I think, to catch it without the substantial training to know what's happening there, to sort of look for that, to see that, to cross-reference names, cross-reference social security information, all these details. But that, I think, is what needs to be done. And I train companies all the time to do this, to sort of be on the lookout for these sorts of things: business email compromises, different types of fraud that can be executed via insurance of fraud, AI. But without that, I don't see how you do it. And another thing worth pointing out is a lot of stuff I'm describing isn't new. It's not like really AI based or even email based. People were committing insurance health fraud before I was born, right? There are sitcoms in the 1950s about somebody pretending to be hit by a car. They weren't really, but this just takes it to another level. You can do it now from Russia or North Korea now, and you can submit your insurance claim via email using a social security number you found on the dark web, and there you go. You're collecting a few $1,000s at a time. People in North Korea, the cyber criminals in North Korea, I should say, they make a living out of doing that.
Now, as far as AI goes, I know that there are companies that are utilizing it to detect certain frauds. And have you had any exposure to that?
Quite a bit. It's an arms race now, right? Because the company's using AI to detect fraud and to, guard against ransomware and whatnot. Criminals using AI to evade that detection and to commit better ransomware, which causes the companies to get better AI and so on and so on and so forth, right?
The robots are at war.
Basically, and you see that in a variety of different areas with respect to AI. For example, I don't want to get too far afield, but AI watermarking, right? So one thing you could do is to say, okay, if you use an AI program to generate a video showing Griffin, you have to somehow mark it so another AI program could tell, hey, wait a minute, that's not really Sean Griffin. It's somebody much better looking than he is. So
That's not possible.
you're
I'm
right.
just going to go ahead and say that on record as well. That is
Very,
not possible.
excellent, excellent. Okay, let me
And I
hit a
do
few
want my
buttons.
check later.
Okay, hold on. I'm sending you via email. This is
Okay, great.
and so the AI can spot that, and then you can go from there. But then you can get another AI program to remove it. Matter of fact, if you type into Google, as I did the other day, AI watermarking, it automatically completes AI watermarking removal. Watermark removal program. So Google's AI is happy to guide you to places that you can remove the AI watermarking that Google actually puts on its own its own AI generated images. It's an arms race in a variety of areas, and insurance fraud is just one of them.
I know one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about cybersecurity and these sorts of things is something that Bill actually had brought up to me. He and I were talking about it off podcast, which was that there are a lot of attorneys who are sending medical bills unencrypted via email,
Medical records.
yeah, medical records, excuse me. Yeah, where they have the basically the big five or the personal identification information, PPI. And I know that that could be an issue. And most of us aren't in the office anymore. So a lot of it has been going towards remote. And has this been a bigger issue? What do we need to tell attorneys or claimants when they're sending us information? Because it's kind of a pain to encrypt and unencrypt stuff.
It is a pain. You actually asked two questions at once, so I'll try to hit both
Sorry.
of them. No, it's fine. I mean, the one question says, okay, what should I do? I get this unencrypted PII and all this other information. What should I do with it? Now, technically, it's not a HIPAA violation because the attorney is not a health provider, right? But still, come on, attorney. If this is your client's information, you're supposed to keep client's confidential information confidential. You have an ethical obligation to do so, and you're not satisfying it when you're sending around their social security number via an unencrypted email, and you're just not. Courts won't even accept a filing with somebody's social security number in there without redaction. I mean, they'll bounce it right back in your face. At least they were here in DC, Maryland, Virginia. So the attorneys, if any attorneys out there, yes, do not just send your client's PII via email to anybody. Put it in the proper FTP site so the person can download, use the password, do something to protect that information. Now you get this information. What are you supposed to do with it? Well, you've got to protect it, right? Because you can quibble about how much of a duty you have to protect it. But if you get hacked and the information is out there, I mean, I guess it'll be a little bit of a defense to say, well, the attorney sent it to us like this. We just kept it like this. But all that means is you have somebody to share the liability with. Doesn't mean you actually escape the liability. And most of my clients rather just avoid the lawsuit altogether. Much to my dismay, this really cuts into my earnings, you understand. So for you, so part of me says, yeah, sure, leave it unencrypted, paint it on your wall if you want to. But my ethical obligation to say, no, you need to safeguard that information as much as you can. I mean, do you put it somewhere you would keep your confidential information that you would not want to get out there, and the company should have protocols for that. But just keep that safe and sound, because again, you can hire somebody like me to say, well, they didn't really have a duty, blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you're still going to be subject to a lawsuit probably, because you're the email that was hacked. They're going to say you didn't do all the stuff that you could have done, and I'm going to get to the data breach notification requirements that you'd be subject to in under every state of the union, plus DC and a couple territories too, if that information got out, whether you should have had it or not. So that's a very long way of answering what I'm sure you thought was a very short question as to, what happens if I get personally identifiable information. Yes, it's a hassle, but what's more of a hassle? Getting sued. That's really a hassle. So
yeah, and I will I use this phrase often here, but in New York, we have something called Regulation 500 that applies to insurance companies and anybody that works for insurance companies, that we have to have safeguards in place. We have to be audited every, so often with respect to cybersecurity. It imposes some regulations on us that we just don't want to receive this stuff via regular email. Now, if we're receiving it, I guess it's one thing if we're sending it to some unknown source. But if we're receiving it, there's really not much we can do other than capture it and then lock it down once we get it.
I mean, what are you supposed to do? You get an solicited email. Hey, here's my client's social security number.
Yeah.
You could tell the attorney beforehand, listen, you're going to need your client's PII, send it through this FTP site, whatever protocols you have. But ideally, you reach out to the attorney beforehand. But
we send
some people don't read.
Every bit of correspondence we send to an attorney gives them instructions, and they all ignore it.
People, one of the ironclad laws of physics, right? Better than gravity or speed of light is people don't read. You can show people something, send it to 1 million times in writing, and nobody will read it. And that's just what you do. And, it's good that you set it up, because then you can say, if
we told them,
we told you so. Look at this email, this letter we sent you. It told you right here. Don't send us this stuff. Use their FTP site or what have you, and you send it to us unencrypted anyway. All you can do, because it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and if there is a breach, it doesn't mean that our papers that we send out is a get out of jail free card or anything. We're still responsible to keep that stuff private.
You also want to keep it private, and if it's encrypted too, a lot of times in a lot of states you don't have to it as a breach if the data that the hackers got to was encrypted, and they can't actually get access. So that's a little bit of a help to you too, if and when something does happen. Now again, this is not legal advice. Your mileage may vary depending on where you are in particular circumstances, but that does give you a little bit of wiggle room in terms of your data breach notification requirements in a lot of places.
I always have to sign off by saying, yes, I protect even codes that I don't even know, like in Europe and stuff, like GDPR and all of this kind of stuff. And I don't want to get too far afield, like how does that impact us? But it seems to be very, very burdensome in some instances. And I would wonder if claims are being targeted since we do have this kind of information, PPI and HIPAA information, and maybe we don't, as the P&C property and casualty market, don't protect ourselves as well as a health carrier would, or something to that effect.
Well, healthcare is very specific cybersecurity requirements, but in New York, insurance companies do too, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, yes, insurance companies, they're a rich treasure trove of PII, of other information you could use. I mean, somebody fills out an insurance form, they put down, okay, who's a contact? Oh, it's my sister. Oh, it's my wife. Oh, and that's very valuable to criminals of all types. And, just so I'm not blasting at insurance companies, law firms are the same way. I wrote an article many years ago, and I've been revising it ever since. And it's called Attorneys' Liability for Data Breach. And it said back in 2015, hey, attorneys, you have a treasure trove of information that criminals would really like to get their hands on. Keep it safe, because you have an ethical obligation to keep that stuff safe. And also you're going to be on the hook for lawsuits or what have you if it gets out there. And attorneys are very, very bad at anything with cybersecurity, because it's really, really hard to get an attorney to do something they're not really inclined to do in terms of anything, because, it's like herding cats. It's like everybody's has their own base and everything. So nobody really has a boss. So they do whatever they want to do. So cybersecurity for law firms is generally a disaster. That's why you see law firms getting attacked so frequently, just because it's hard to impose standards upon law firm attorneys, and they have such valuable information. Insurance companies have a lot of valuable information, and that's why they get targeted so much. So you're 100% correct that insurance companies are going to get targeted more and more in the future, because people see how valuable that information is to commit fraud or other crimes.
You find that many small or large, for that matter, law firms don't have cybersecurity insurance coverage?
Most do now. How good is it? Just sort of depends on the company, but it really is going to be one of those things that law firms now know they need to have some sort of cybersecurity protocols. Now, how good are those protocols? It varies, but in terms of regulated industries, the law firms really are pretty heavily regulated. Insurance companies are very regulated. Even if you're regulated by the SEC, you're very regulated as well. I posted on LinkedIn a while ago a story about a company that was hit with a ransomware attack, right? And then a few days later, the ransomware attackers contacted the SEC, and they said, hey, this company has not reported their ransomware attack within 2 days as required by the SEC. We would like a reward for reporting them. How do we know they were attacked? Well, we're the ones who attacked them. So
Wow.
That's some gumption right there, man.
that
That is some gumption. I do have a question on all of this. Taking from a claims point of view, what should and I have seen an increase in cyber claims, and my stepson has been working on some of them. So what would be the process of working cyber claims besides the just normal? You have to investigate, you have to call the insured, you have to do this. I think what we told him to do was, contact the insured's bank and then contact the vendor's bank and get those fraud departments involved. But other than that, how does an adjuster adjust a cyber claim?
Investigation tends to be investigation, right? Like I do a lot of investigation, a lot of different contexts, right? I've done cyber investigations, obviously. I've done insurance fraud investigations. I've done Buy American Act investigations. They all tend to be sort of like, okay, start with the basic statute, gather the facts, and put each facts in where they belong in terms of the statutory requirements or the policy requirements, and then pretty soon the conclusion reveals itself, right? And so it's the same deal there. Now, if you're talking about a business email compromise claim, somebody paid a fake invoice, then okay, you have a pretty good outline there. Contact both parties' banks, see if they get involved. Law enforcement, usually both companies will contact law enforcement, and the federal government will see if they can get the money back. In terms of adjusting it, usually the issue isn't what happened, right? I mean, everybody, both the vendor and the customer, can agree on exactly what happened. Look, I have this email from Bill, but it wasn't really from Bill. I guess I should have seen the email was it's Bill at fraudster.com. I probably should have caught that, but and okay, there you have it. Then you go back and look at the policy, right? Because again, nobody's expecting the average adjuster to be like one of those guys in NCIS. Okay, enhance, and, follow the trail himself. Hop on a plane to Hong Kong, start chasing down the miscreants. No, that's just not realistic. You just sort of figure out what happened and say, okay, according to the policy, either you're covered or you're not. And that's how the claim's going to go. Now, each cybersecurity incident got to be different. I mean, what I described just then is not going to be applicable to a ransomware incident. Okay, if we just got it with a ransomware attack, that's something else entirely, and the adjustment process for that is going to be substantially different, involving accountants and so on and so forth. And
that's something that you could be dealing with in real time, where you've got, you're within that. It's happening now, and they need their data, and there's this thing hanging out there that they want their money.
Very much so. And from the adjuster's perspective, the insurance company's called and they say, okay, according to your policy, they will give you somebody from a panel or hire somebody, will pay for it depending on, and then I go out there in some form or fashion. I bring in the vendors, the ransomware negotiators, if appropriate, the accountants, the team we have to deal with the ransomware attack to hopefully resolve it speedily, and then deal with it from there. And from the adjustment perspective, again, the investigation part is the hard thing in the world, because usually it's not much questions whether you've been hit by a ransomware attack. Okay, that's pretty easy to prove. I can imagine somebody faking a ransomware attack, but it would be more trouble than it's worth, honestly. That's when there are easier frauds to commit, and then just go through it's an ordinary claim. Now, you might need to bring in somebody with cybersecurity expertise at some point, depending on what happened, and you shouldn't hesitate to do that. But generally, it's going to be, nothing too extravagant to do just to adjust the claim, unless and until you have to bring in the experts. Like I was brought in, I've been brought on several claims, like, okay, is this ransomware attack covered? If so, for how much? Are these claims covered? Are these not covered? We need your opinion on this. But that's, that's me, Sean, the coverage attorney, not Sean, the adjuster. I'm not adjuster one, but so all I'll say is I would go back to what I said before. Just because something happened via email doesn't make it some sort of cyber thing that adjuster can't possibly do. Just gather the facts and see where they lead, and that'll lead you to the conclusion that you want.
One of the misconceptions I deal with a lot in the insurance world here, the claims world, is that not everything is solved by insurance. As an example, yeah, I know, but I paid my premium and I got full coverage. When someone's house burns down, for example, they have to find a contractor. That's a headache. They got to take care of all the stuff. The insurance company is there to, reimburse them and pay the bill. But insurance is not designed to swoop in and make the world better for them immediately, just by making a claim. And when there's a cybersecurity incident, there are things that an insurance company that offers cybersecurity coverage can do to help that situation, but they're not the solution. And there are just some things that the policyholder, the victim, should have probably done prior to the event to have prevented it. It just seems like it's not a good fit. Insurance as a concept and cybersecurity incidents, it doesn't seem like there's a good solution in the insurance world to solve that problem for a policyholder. What do you think about that?
It can be. I mean, just like, okay, the insurance company can't prevent a hurricane, right? But we can pay if your house is torn down by a hurricane, right? The same deal with a ransomware attack or some of the cyber incident. If it's covered by the policy, assuming that, then you can say, okay, what do we pay to do? There are a lot of costs associated with that, right? There's a cost of getting your data back. There's a cost of maybe PR, the cost of hiring Sean, the attorney, to come in and deal with it. There are a lot of costs associated with that. The policy, may or may not pay depending on what kind of policy you bought. And then you can be made roughly whole. Now, you mentioned, and I'm so glad you did this, you mentioned, well, maybe there's something they could have done to mitigate that beforehand. And I always say, yes, there is. Every company should have an incident response plan and a business continuation plan in the event that something like this happens, because it's gonna happen. You are going to get hacked. How likely are you to get hacked? Let me put it this way. I was in New York, and I'm
not sure I want to hear this.
Cybersecurity. I was speaking a speech about cybersecurity, and I was checking out of the hotel. I was checking out of a Marriott hotel, and then I got an email. And I looked at my email. It's like, oh, Marriott Hotels requested for me that we've been hacked. And all your credit card information is out there. And I was like, well, joke's on you. And not much room on my credit card. So good luck with that, buddy. But I was like, well, that's how easily you can get hacked. And then I got home, and it was around the beginning of the year, so I was going to get in shape. I had my Fitness Pal on my phone, right? Got an email from my Fitness Pal. Guess what? You've been hacked. Your information is out there. Everybody knows how much overweight you are now, Mr. Holiday Sean. I'm like, oh, crap, right? And so after that, I got the solution. I left my firm. Well, I didn't get the solution, but I did switch jobs, right? And my old job contacted me a couple months later. Sean, guess what? We've been hacked. They have your social security. I'm like, okay, if I, the security attorney, can get my information out there 3 times in let's say a 6-month period, then pretty much everybody is going to suffer some sort of cybersecurity incident. It needs to be prepared to deal with that.
Yeah, I have always just thought, you know what, I'm not going to worry about it because I have been hacked. All of my information is already out there. I do have an associate who she's being forced, quote unquote, by her landlord to pay electronically. And so she's opened up a whole nother bank account so that they don't get the normal bank account that she writes checks from, because she still writes physical checks. And I'm like, you know what? All of your information is still out there, which leads to another question. And then we're running out of time here, but what are the future challenges that you see in cybersecurity, cybercrime, or opportunities for adjusters, or challenges for adjusters in the cyberspace?
Well, right now my cybersecurity practice is being eaten by ChatGPT and other AI issues that are out there. And I think AI is going to sort of dominate the discussion for a while now in terms of challenges for adjusters in their careers, challenges for adjusters in adjusting claims. You mentioned before, AI can help you investigate fraud claims, that it can to an extent, but that has its issues too. Now, what I see as one big issue, and I've spoken about this in front of insurance groups before, and I will again very soon, is AI comes with its own issues, because AI is trained on what people do, which means it sort of takes both the good and the bad parts of people, much like most science fiction movies you've seen, where the robot learns to love, but the robot could also learn how to hate. And one big issue that comes up and getting more and more attention is the attention of AI bias, right? The example I typically use is, listen, if you're an insurance company, I'm going a bit above the amount of adjusting, right? Well, let me take it back to an adjuster, right? You're an adjuster. Bill, the adjuster's out there, and he's adjusting his claims, but he's using AI to do it, right? He's like, man, this is great. You used to have to work 8 hours a day. Now I work like 30 minutes a day. I can spend the rest of the day drinking banana daiquiris. I don't do it. I just press this enter button every so often. Look at all the claims I'm adjusting. I'm going to get a promotion, right? Then some plaintiff's attorney comes through. We're like, Bill, we've been looking at your claims here, and we see that everybody who lives in this part of town, their claims are getting denied. Everybody that's in this part of town, you're accepting their claims full value. Why is that? And also, Bill, it looks like the people that are in this part of town are different ethnicity, the ones who are getting paid their full claims, whatever the ethnicities may be. And so here, Bill, here's your racial discrimination lawsuit. How do you answer it? It's not going to be an answer for people to say, well, the computer did it. Look, I have this like here on a laptop. Or look, on my phone, my phone app did it. So don't blame me. And don't worry, lots of federal agencies have come out and say, don't blame your AI program for discrimination or bias. That's still on you. Just like if you'd hired a really biased employee who didn't like women, right? And denied women's claims and granted men's claims, you're still responsible for what happens there. Now, what is the justice supposed to do about if the insurance company mandates, okay, you have to use this particular AI program? The only thing you can do is make sure that you oversee that process fairly aggressively, because AI is fast, but it's not smart. I've thought for a while calling it artificial intelligence was a misnomer. It's not intelligent. It's not smart. It can't really think any more than a calculator can think. It could just like process information very, very quickly in a way that seems to us like thinking, right? But you still have to be in there. Insurance companies and any other company using AI has to insert a human early into the process, right? You can't just take the output and then keep it moving any more than you let a calculator pick its own numbers before it calculates. You have to be the one to be in there early in the process, make sure it's going well. If you buy an AI program to do this, do some auditing of that program. Okay, how have you managed bias? I'm using bias from one example, but it could be a lot of things. How do you know that you're actually having enough false positive, mitigating false positives or false negatives for fraud? What is this thing doing? And that's going to be a tough discussion to have, because they're going to say, this is our proprietary information. We've got the genie in the bottle here. We're not going to give you all of our information, but then how do you trust it? When you get sued, what do you say other than we hereby interplead the AI company that sold us this pile of junk, which I guess you could do, assuming you haven't already waived liability in the terms of service. That's going to be a really big issue. It's going to get increasingly more prominent as we go on using these issues. So that's the biggest issue I see in insurance adjusting in pretty much any area in the world that uses AI.
We've actually already been down that road, though, and I can't remember the Colossus. That was it. When we were using Colossus, for those adjusters who are quote old enough end of quote to know Colossus, we've actually already been down that road. So we may be able to maybe knock on wood, learn from those mistakes. But yeah, I hear you with the bias and everything that that is going to be a big issue.
Also, I'd like to compliment you on that punk Colossus down that roads. Get it? The Colossus.
Yes. You're so funny. Didn't I tell you he was funny, Bill?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
uh,
Good
Why are you
catch.
shaking your head?
I'm nodding my
Okay,
head.
no.
I'm not shaking my head.
Okay.
I say yes and I say no.
You know, Sean, I want to thank you for coming on and joining us. Is there anything you want to let people know that you're doing? Any articles that are getting ready to come out? Any speaking gigs, podcasts that you're doing? Anything like that?
Well, let's see. In a couple of weeks, I'll be the convention chair of the FDCC winter meeting in St. Petersburg, Florida. If this goes up early enough, FDCC members should sign up. We have record attendance already. Next week, I'm speaking before the New England Claims Executives Association about AI and the future of insurance. The same speech I gave before the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies last year. And the DRI Diversity for Success seminar, I'm going to be talking about AI and bias in June in Nashville. Registration for that is open as well. You can sign up for that too. You can find me on LinkedIn, Sean, spelled correctly, Sean, Griffin, like Merv Griffin. I'm the bald, black, devilishly handsome guy with a goatee and a gray suit. So you can follow me there and get cybersecurity, insurance, and other tips, and just be a better cyber citizen.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
Big fan of your haircut, by the way, Sean.
Thank you. It does make one look more intelligent, sophisticated, does it not?
Absolutely. I would totally agree with both of you. Our next podcast, by the way, is going to be February 29th. It's going to be Leap Day. And we're going to be talking about, Bill and I are going to be talking about how leap years affect policies and everything and lawsuits.
And podcast schedules.
And podcast schedules. It'll be weird. It'll be fun. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Do follow Sean. Sean, do you want to give your phone number or your email address out or anything like that? Or no, because it's already out there on the platform.
It's already out on the web, but if you want to go to seancgriffin.com, you can find all my contact information pretty quickly.
Thank you, Bill. Anything else?
No, I'm all set. Thanks a million, Sean. It was great to talk to you.
Great talking to you too. I had a lot of fun.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.autin.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.